Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, whichever one it is, I forget. Um, what I want you to do is in the chat function, post the most exciting thing you've done on Zoom in the last 9 weeks, since that's how long we've been here. Obviously, keep it PG-13. Again, one more time, most exciting thing you've done on Zoom in the last 9 weeks. All right. Let's see what our responses are real quick. Interesting. Leaving the Zooms. Good one, Vivian Taylor. All right. Well, you guys indirectly are funny yet sarcastic and maybe slightly depressing too. Okay, we're gonna move on here and get going. See where we can get today. I'm not exactly sure. Just gonna try something a little different. I'm not gonna say it's the most exciting thing in the face of the earth, but it might help engagement and it might help you learn a little better. So I'm going to modules. Hopefully you're following my screen. You haven't minimized it because you're already frustrated or bored. So today I want you guys to go into your modules and upload 19 fill-in notes update 2020. Okay. So you're going to download that. I'm going to make sure I see if I even have it. I do. There we go. For some reason the font changed, but yeah, it should look like that. So if you were here, we do something kind of fun with this called speed notes, where I put a word bank up and you and your partner try to do it as fast as you can and fill out the blanks, and then whoever wins gets extra credit. But you're not here yet, and I realize that some people probably don't learn the best off of just notes. So this will give you guys the ability to follow along and participate, and obviously use the hand raise function or the chat function. Let's go with hand raise function at first, see how it works. And this is how we're going to take notes today. At the end, I've got some pictures to show you that are also uploaded to the Canvas module, but I'm going to start it with this and we'll kind of go from there, okay? All right, so the theme for this chapter was colonial economies and governments in the New World. Basically, the Spanish and Portuguese empires that were conquest at the beginning of the 1500s, and then they turned into trying to have to deal with it and rule it, just like the Mongols and other famous conquerors like Alexander the Great, and they didn't do the best job, and then other people replaced them. Sounds about right. But we probably need a few more details beyond that 15-second summary that I just gave you. So you guys follow along with me. Probably easiest for you to just fill in the blanks on your computer screen, like I said, by going like this and then putting the real wealth in America came from, you guys know what the correct answer is already? Does anyone want to raise their hand? Fancy hand raise function. Tell me where the real wealth came from. If not, I'll give you guys the first one. Lily, do you know?
Is it the silver mines?
Mining. Yeah, good job. So real wealth in America came from the mines. 80% of the world's silver base in the 1600s came from the Americas. 250 million pounds of silver. That's a lot. Okay. So in the Caribbean, Colombia, and Chile, what was it? What goes in the blank there? Anybody want to raise the hand and let's try it? Oh, we got someone in the waiting room. Okay, it's not silver, then it's probably Hannah?
Sugar.
Gold. Good guess. Yes, correct. So gold was in the Caribbean, Colombia, and Chile, and then in Mexico and Peru, it was Hannah?
I didn't mean to have my hand up, sorry.
Oh, Kaylee.
Silver.
There you go. Nice. Okay, so mining brought in the most amount of money. Gold in the Caribbean, Colombia, and Chile, and later in Portugal, and Minas Gerais. And mining was really labor intensive. That's an issue. We're going to hopefully read a little article tomorrow about how labor intensive it was. All right. So let's go down to silver in the Spanish Empire. Potosi, which was the largest mine in the Americas and by far in Peru, was a town of about 160,000 people, but it produced 80% of Peru's silver. And at first, the mine was like close to the surface, like the iron was, and the silver and the ore. But then as time went on, it just got deeper and deeper, and the mines got deeper, and so it got more and more dangerous to try to get silver out of these large holes. Okay. Blank in Mexico created opulent churches and luxury, basically, and demanded all these luxury products from Europe. And another name, this is a name for a wealthy mining center. Did anyone pick this one up? This is one I bet you're not going to get. It's called a Zacatecas. Okay. So these were wealthy mining areas in Mexico that started to create Christian style or European style cities and luxury products because there was so much wealth there. People had money to spend, not the natives, the Europeans that came there. Both mines initially drafted workers. However, by the 17th century, wages were being paid to natives, not at first, okay? Mines were owned by individuals, but blank of the production went to Spain. This is a good one. Ethan.
1/5.
Yeah, you cannot forget the 1/5 rule, okay? This is a big one. So if it's not in your notes, if it's not highlighted or bolded, the 1/5 rule, that was how the Spanish crown made so much money, all right? 1/5 of everything that was made was collected, and then it was sent on galleons over to Sevilla twice a year. If we had more time, I have a video I would show you guys, but maybe there's a small chance we'll get to it today. Okay. Mining stimulated distant regions then that supplied mercury, food, clothing, mules, and coca leaves. So, you know what mercury is, folks? Yeah, I didn't know either until I started teaching this course, to be honest. I don't know very little about Spain. Or I mean about mining or anything about science. Jill, what is it?
Mercury is like an element, and I think it's like a type of metal, and I know it's like poisonous to humans.
Yeah. I know those three things too, but I don't know much more. But I do know this. If you mix mercury with silver and its ore is like the part of the rock you don't want, and you blast it with like high pressure water, it actually causes the silver to separate from its ore. So at first, they had a lot of difficulty getting the silver out of the rest of the rock. But then at a mine called Huancavelica, if you wrote that down in your notes, Huancavelica was where they had this massive mercury supply that, of course, they stole from the natives and claimed for themselves, and that allowed them to separate the silver from the ore much faster. You guys know what coca leaves are, right? Well, coca leaves would deaden the hunger and deaden the senses of the Peruvian workers who were working these mines. It's essentially cocaine, not, I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, I've watched Narcos like 7 times. It's cocaine, but not in its purest form, okay? So the Spanish were already providing that to the Peruvian miners, which resulted in obvious massive amount of death. When you're talking about 300 feet more or more going into a mine with 80 to 100 pounds of rock on your back and not being fed anything, not the most healthy system. All right, so that's the mine. Let's talk about the hacienda system then. Blank percent of the population lived and worked on the land as an agrarian society. That means a farming society. Anybody have a guess on the percentage here? We got Luella.
Was it 80%?
You are correct. So 80% of the population was still farmers. Okay. And they lived on large estates known as, this is not a hard one. Go ahead and give it to you since it's in the haciendas. Okay. So the haciendas typically were large estates that included the workers that were on them. And that was part of the Spanish system of giving land grants, what's called encomiendas. And so if you were an encomendero, you got an encomiendas, and then you got to keep track of all of that and tax it or work it, whatever you wanted to do. The people on there. All right, and then livestock, grains, and grapes were the primary commodities. And then also cattle, sheep, horses, eventually things that were made better in the Americas that were originally European or Afro-Eurasian. That makes sense? Good. Okay. Oh, that's bad. All right. Industry and commerce. Sheep raising in the New World led to what kind of production, folks? Katya.
Textile.
Yeah. So they didn't have to go all the way to India to get cotton. They could get it in South America, and then they could make their own clothes. Because of its ability to produce food and clothing, America became self-sufficient, and the only thing they needed from Europe then were luxury goods, like, what kind of luxury goods do you guys think? It's not on there. What would Europeans provide? Hmm. Hats, like fancy hats, guns. Um, they provided silverware, um, dresses, things that were European luxuries at the time that they could have produced in the Americas had they thought hard enough about it, but they would still pay exorbitant fees to get that from the Europeans. All right. To keep control of the trade, Spain allowed only Spaniards to trade with the New World. And then, as you read, towards the 1600s and after, Spain lost that dominance. So I told you the name of the port already, but what port was it that the Spanish would bring all of the money in from the New World? Hannah?
Seville.
Yeah, Sevilla. So that way, then it had to have the king's stamp on it, which is how the money sign actually, like the union of Ferdinand and Isabella, is what created the money sign. You guys have made a dollar sign before with two lines between it. That's literally Aragon and Castile unifying, and then that was the king's stamp that had to go on every package. All right, a merchant gold guild or a blank kept track of goods that were shipped. What are we looking for? What was a merchant guild that kept track of goods shipped? Lily.
Is it pronounced consolado?
Good. A consulado. Consulado was this guild then in Sevilla, which tracked all of the shipments, and that's how they still have accurate records of how much gold was collected by the Spanish in the 15 and 1600s. Okay. To protect trade, then a convoy of Spanish blank were used to transport goods. I think I already gave you this, but it would be what's the name for a larger caravel? Hannah again, putting the team on the back.
A galleon.
Yeah, Spanish galleons. Okay. And piracy became common towards the end of the 1500s, early 1600s, as the Protestants, the Dutch and the English, wanted to get in on this monopoly that the Spanish had. All right. Spanish rule. You had a lot of influence by the blank church. Lucy.
The Catholic Church. Right?
Yeah, you're right. I just got a remind message from one of my starters that he's got COVID-like symptoms. That's not good. Sorry. Yikes. Oh, it is definitely the Catholic Church. And it's confusing because we haven't talked about the Reformation yet, but there were like different sects in the Catholic Church too, like the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and the Jesuits were all different societies of Catholics who were trying to influence different areas, but had similar goals. And they worked pretty much in unison with the Spanish at first until the Spanish realized that they had to have more direct rule by the 1700s. All right, we already talked about the Treaty of Tordesillas. I would underline that if you have your little fancy computer out and you can like highlight something. I'd probably highlight that. That was, again, 1494, agreement between Portugal and Spain to split up South America so that it didn't they didn't go to war with each other. All right, and then Blank was the codification of laws in the colonies made by the two viceroyalties. So, you guys remember the name of the laws? It's a fun one to say. Brooke, what do you think?
Was it the Reconciliation? I don't know.
Yeah. More fun to say in person, I promise. Reconciliation. See, I speak German, and my Spanish is absolutely terrible, but I still give it my best effort. The Reconciliation was the codified laws that the colonies had, and they were made by what would be two leaders, one in Mexico, one in Peru, who answered to the king. We would call them, Hannah?
The vice royalties.
Yeah, viceroyalties. Okay. So there were two sets of two capitals per se. It's the easiest way to explain it. Okay. One in Lima, which the Spanish made that city. It's a huge city today. I think it has like 6 to 8 people. So remember, Cusco was the capital of the Inca, but it wasn't in a good location to trade. And Lima was closer to the water. And so Lima became one center, and then the other center was Mexico City, also known as former Tenochtitlan. All right, missionaries were replaced with bishops who controlled parishes. So they brought in the structure of the Catholic Church. I was going to show you guys this picture right now because I feel like it, even though maybe the timing isn't perfect. But this is a good old picture from Brazil right here. So this is a church that's in the middle of Rio de Janeiro that was built in the 1600s. And you can kind of compare this to some of the cathedrals. I mean, obviously it has a little more modern architecture, but the power of the Catholic Church became almost as powerful in the Americas as it did in Western Europe. Okay. All right, and then the blank was set up in the Americas, but natives were usually exempt. This was the system of expelling any false believers who were not Catholic. You guys know what this one is? Anybody? Maybe you should inquire about it. Making jokes on jokes here. It's called the Inquisition. Okay. We haven't talked about it yet because we haven't talked about religion in Europe yet, but that's what you get for having a new curriculum this year. The Inquisition was a response to the Spanish taking over Castile and Aragon and the Reconquista and the Protestant Reformation. So there still was, even in the Americas, there still was this disagreement between Protestants and Catholics. All right, let's keep going. All right, Portugal in the New World. Obviously, I've been to Brazil before. It's pretty neat. Different than Spanish America because there was way more intermixing between races. And so it was much more difficult to enforce the racial hierarchy that the Spanish enforced in their area of Americas than it was in Portugal. All right, who discovered Portugal? Or who discovered Brazil? Sorry, Ethan.
Pedro Alvarez Cabral.
Pedro Cabral. Yes, he was trying to figure out his way how to get down to the tip of Africa, and he washed up in Brazil. All right. So a few advancements were made in the first arbitrary number, 30 years. It's easier when you have a word bank. By 1549, though, a governor was sent to Brazil because of growing interest in. This is what set off a domino effect on the northeast coast of South America. Hannah.
Sugar plantations.
Sugar plantations is correct. So the Dutch, the British, the French all had sugar plantations just north of Brazil because of this. All right. By 1600, native resistance was put down by military action. Natives were converted, and disease spread rapidly and killed off massive amounts of the population, similar to Spanish America. During the 1600s, then, slave labor was imported to work on these sugar plantations and then to work in the gold mines. And when it's all said and done, Brazil, through Portugal, would import more slaves than any other colony in the world from the continent of Africa. All right, so Brazil became the leading producer of sugar in the world, and during the 17th century, over, anyone pick this up in the notes, 7,000 slaves per year were being imported just to Brazil. And they hadn't really explored off the coast very far either, so small area. So the Brazilian economy then, these guys kind of need to know this. That's why I'm doing this for you. The Brazilian economy was based off one cash crop. And this tended then to become the basis for many of the colonies. And it's not a good thing because the cash crop, the one thing you're making, varies on a world level. And the price of it, obviously in demand, then means your economy is completely dependent on world demand. Okay, what's the vocab term for that? Did you guys pick it up in your reading? Okay, you probably wouldn't get it. It's called a monoculture. Okay, when the economy is based off of one particular aspect, called a monoculture. Can someone give me an example of a monoculture today? Anybody have one? Country with a monoculture. I'll give you guys about 20 seconds to think of it. If not, I will give you one that's been pretty recently affected. Saudi Arabia and petroleum. Does that make sense? Price of oil went down to to a negative value. That definitely hurt the Saudi Arabian economy. And caused them to slash production. All right, and then in Brazil, what kind of missionaries worked to convert natives and slaves? What do you guys think? No hiddles here. Jill.
Catholic?
Yeah, but Jesuits. Okay. They told you there were different kinds, different sects, and the Jesuits were more powerful in Portugal. That's the difference between Rebuff and Cathedral. You guys know that, right? Rebuff's Jesuit, Cathedral's Roman Catholic. All right, so world influence on Brazil. Spain controlled Portugal from 1580 to 1640. During this time, other European countries colonized Caribbean islands and grew their own sugar. So basically, after the Spanish Armada, you had other European countries like the Dutch, especially, and the French and the British that are going to try to claim as much as they can Okay, Haiti and the Dominican Republic would be a good example. Jamaica would be a good example of that. Cuba would be a good example of that. And that meant that the price for slaves, because of all these new sugar plantations, went up, increased. While the price for sugar, because now sugar was more available on a world level, went which way?
Down.
Good, got it. Decreased. Good. All right. Just as Brazil was becoming less important, then, like I said, gold was discovered in more into the interior, and this gold rush that occurred meant that they needed a lot more slaves. And this gold rush that made Rio de Janeiro the capital of Brazil actually caused Brazil in the long run to cause its own downfall, because the Portuguese, if you remember reading at the end, tried to tighten their grip on Brazil because of its value, and this would cause the Brazilians to say, hey, we should be able to govern ourselves. And so it's not long into the 1800s that they'll end up gaining independence. And then because they don't really manufacture products because they're based off of a cash economy on gold, their lack of manufacturing, Brazil still is affected by it today. Their economy could be one of the strongest in the world, if not the strongest, but they don't have the infrastructure yet. They're getting it. Okay. I was there in like 2010 or 2011, and it was growing quite a bit and becoming more urbanized. And I know it is even more today, just a lot of poor people. Okay, let's about multiracial societies then. Okay. The Sociedad de Castas. Okay, that was the term for basically the caste system that the Spanish set up. All right. And they did their best to continue the social hierarchies of the Inca and the Aztec. Remember how the Inca and the Aztec had basically high priests and cults where you were at the top and then everybody else was below you? Well, the Spanish came in and said, well, we're going to continue to do this exact same thing. And the Spanish discouraged interracial mixing, whereas, like I said, the Portuguese, they didn't really have a choice. They needed to be able to discover more into the interior, so they needed more people. All right, so blank were the conquerors and the immigrants. These are people born in Europe. Who is this? Mushi.
Europeans.
Europeans, correct. Africans were the slaves, and then the conquered people that died off in large quantities were the natives. All right, so the hierarchy worked as such. Okay, if you had Spanish blood and you were born in Spain, you were known as a peninsulare. Okay, if you were of Spanish blood, but you were born to two parents that had moved to the Americas, what were you called? Looking for a hand raise. Lily.
I think it says Creoles.
Yeah, Creoles. So Spanish blood, European blood, but born in the Americas. Okay, mestizo then was a mix of Spanish and native blood, and there was an awful lot of raping and multiple partners for these men who came over. It wasn't high-class men, as you guys, yeah, I think there was a quiz question on that. It was not high-class men who came over as conquistadors. It was middle-level nobles who had no upward mobility. These are the kind of people that came to the Americas looking for land, not people that had already made their fame and their fortune in Spain, there was no reason to leave. I think that makes sense to you guys. Okay, so oftentimes they made the trip without their wives. And so again, concubines, different things like that became part of this kind of gross culture that really was rampant, especially in the 1500s. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. All right, mixture of African and Spanish blood then is known as a can be a derogatory term today. Say it. Anybody? Okay, if Brooke, what were you gonna say?
Or the mulatto?
Yeah.
Mulatto.
Mulattoes. There are people that were of African and Spanish blood. And then natives fell below all four of these categories, and then slaves. Okay. I'm gonna show you a painting here that is kind of symbolic of that in a second. Okay. All right, and then Costas, the word, just means people of mixed origins. And about in 1650, 5 to 10% of society was mixed. And then look, 100 years later, 35 to 40% of society was mixed. Okay. So you can see, despite the fact that they did not want interracial mixing, it happened. And then it got very complicated. And the effects of this racial system, due to the fact that there were disadvantages for mestizos, mulattoes, and natives and slaves, is still obvious in the Americas today. Okay, like I want you guys to understand that. Okay, outside of the United States, if you go south, it's obvious in other territories around South America and Central America. Okay. All right. I wanted to show you guys a few pictures. I'm not necessarily going to, there's nothing else you need to write down in particular. I'm just going to show you a few pictures that I thought were interesting, okay? So bear with me. I know we've only got a few minutes left. All right. First off, you guys take a look at the map. This is the Spanish Empire at its height. So you look at the Philippines over here, look at the islands that control in the South Pacific, and then you move over to your left, which is west, and you'll notice the dominance of North and South America, okay? Obviously, much of that land will become the United States via the Louisiana Purchase and the Spanish-American War, Mexico-American War, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, etc. But you can see that's quite a bit of territory, and this is what they call the Siglo de Oro, the golden age of Spain until the Spanish Armada, when then the British, the French, and the Dutch are going to become their rivals and pass them up. Other thing I wanted to show you then, take a look at the world trade routes. What kind of patterns do you guys notice here? Lily.
All right, I don't know if it's a pattern, but there's no trade routes going into like Asia because they had closed off their borders.
China, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, China.
Yeah, but look at how important India was to the British. You guys see that in the yellow? You see the Dutch also in the Indonesia, how important that was. I mean, how obvious is triangular trade though? Pretty obvious, right? And you notice also, I mean, how important Spanish shipping was for the Spaniards as well. Okay, let's go. This is a map then by 1780. You can see Guyana is broken up. These are different countries that control sugar plantations. You'll notice then Brazil, and then the Viceroyalty of Peru, Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, which is going to become Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, New Granada, okay, and then New Spain, which obviously is centered around Mexico City. The other thing then is this is called a Costas painting, okay? This was literally a painting of what a particular race looked like. And so the categories that I showed you guys, there were much more categories than that. You can see on here, they're defining 16 kinds of people, what they wear, what they look like, how they dress. And that is racism to a T right there. And that racial policy, again, made people not get educations, made them not have any say in the government, made them farmers, mine workers, etc. And so if you go back and you really think about this, like if you turn your brain caps on, go back to this, think about the Americas and the influence of the Spanish, and then think that they put this system where they conquered. You have to recognize the consequences of that. Okay. This is the church. I just wanted to go into the fact that almost every city in South America is patterned after a grid-like system with a church in the center, a university close to the center, government buildings close to the center, just like cities in Europe are. If you go to Paris or Hamburg, or if you go to Madrid, you're going to see almost the exact same setup. And that's the influence of the church. And again, the fact that it was set up in the European style. And the styles that were there were pretty much ignored. Last but not least, by the 1700s, the Spanish tried to reform under what was known as the Bourbon reforms, because Philip of Anjou, who was a Bourbon, that means the house of Bourbons are from Paris, okay? French kings. Because of a lack of an heir, Philip of Anjou, who was the brother of the King of France, became the King of Spain, and then tried to really help them out economically. But it was too little too late. They were already small players, and it really, a lot of their land was taken over by the British, and the British controlled them through loans. And then after that, it would be the United States that would take the rest of, or a lot of, the Spanish territory. And we'll talk about the 1800s where they gained their own independence. So, all right, there you go. I don't have much time. Actually, I have no time, so I want to show you real quick the homework tonight. The prep for tomorrow is not that much. Okay, we're going to continue to work on this. This will be like the third time we've done it, so it should be better. So, oh, Daniel. Under assignments, I'll put it in the, I will put it in the module here as soon as I get a chance, like right after this. But 922 soapstone. There's two very short documents, one by De Las Casas and one by Sepulveda, that I want you guys to read and then do soapstones over and then upload them by tomorrow, okay? I'll send the instructions out via Remind too. All right, thanks everybody. Sorry for the long class. I hope you guys, you seemed engaged-ish, and I don't know, it was different, like I said. So, all right, be good. I got to get off here for the rest of for the other people that are all trying to log on now. Thanks everyone. See ya.